The transport ship landed on the orange sand of Kesseris 7, and Jake Reeves stepped out into the hot wind. 2 suns burned in the sky above him. The air was dry and tasted like dust. He had read about this planet in the mission files, but reading was different from feeling. This place wanted to kill everything that lived on it. Behind him, Lisa Marsh and Tom Bradley walked down the ramp. They carried heavy bags filled with tools and equipment. 5 more humans followed them. 8 people total. 8 humans sent to work on a planet that had never known rain. Jake looked across the desert and saw the outpost in the distance. Tall structures floated above the sand. They were beautiful in a strange way. Silver and smooth, they hung in the air without any visible support. These were the Valoran habitats. The Valorans had arrived on this planet 6 months ago. They had brought their advanced technology, and they're even more advanced opinions about other species. The humans walked toward the outpost. The sand shifted under their boots. Every step was difficult. Jake was already sweating through his uniform. He thought about Earth, about the cool forests of Oregon where he grew up. That felt like a different universe now. A tall figure waited for them at the edge of the outpost. He was Valoran. His body looked like it was made of living crystal. Light passed through his skin and created small rainbows on the sand. His name was Commander Vex, and he looked at the humans the way someone might look at insects. "You are the human team," Vex said. His voice sounded like glass scraping against stone. "I expected you yesterday." "Engine trouble," Jake said simply. He did not feel the need to explain more. Vex made a sound that might have been laughter. Human machines. So unreliable. He turned and began walking toward the floating structures. "Come, I will show you where you will work." Jake exchanged a look with Lisa. She raised her eyebrows, but said nothing. They followed the crystal alien into the outpost. The tour was short. Vex showed them the mining equipment, the processing stations, and the alien habitats. Everything was clean and advanced. Small creatures moved around the base of the structures. These were the Dreth, the other alien species working on this planet. They looked like large insects with too many legs. Their bodies were covered in hard shells the color of rust. One Dreth approached the humans. She was smaller than the others, and her shell had patterns of white mixed with the rust color. "I am Kira," she said. Her voice clicked and buzzed, but the translator in Jake's ear made it understandable. "I study the rocks here. You are the geologist?" Lisa stepped forward. "I am." Lisa Marsh. Kira's many eyes studied Lisa with obvious curiosity. "Good. We will work together in the eastern sector. The minerals there are most interesting." Vex interrupted them with an impatient wave of his crystalline hand. "Yes, yes. Introductions later. First, the humans must understand their place here." He pointed to an empty area of sand near the edge of the outpost. "That is where you will build your habitat. We have no room in our structures for you." Jake nodded. He had expected this. "That works fine for us. We brought our own building materials." "Building materials?" Vex tilted his head. The movement made the light inside him shift and change colors. "What do you mean?" "Concrete," Tom Bradley said. He was a big man with thick arms and a face that had been weathered by years of construction work. Steel reinforcement. Deep foundation equipment. Vex stared at them for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a cold sound, like ice cracking. "You are joking. Concrete? That primitive stone mixture?" "It works," Jake said calmly. "Our habitats float using gravitational manipulation," Vex said. He spread his arms wide, showing off the elegant structures above them. "The Dreth dig burrows with perfect temperature control. And you humans want to pile rocks on top of each other like animals?" Lisa spoke up, her voice sharp. On Earth, we have storms that can level entire cities. We learned to build structures that survive them. Concrete and steel have protected human lives for centuries. Vex waved his hand dismissively. Earth, a small wet planet with primitive weather. This is Kisar 7. We have mapped every wind pattern, every temperature change. Our shields can handle anything this desert produces. He looked down at Lisa with something like pity in his crystal eyes. But if you wish to play in the sand like children, I will not stop you. It might be amusing to watch. He walked away, leaving the humans standing in the hot wind. Kira lingered for a moment. Her many legs shuffled nervously in the sand. He is not always so rude, she said quietly. But Valorans believe their technology is the best in the galaxy. They have never been wrong before. There is a first time for everything, Jake said. Kira made a clicking sound that might have been agreement or doubt. Then she followed Vex toward the Valoran structures. The humans stood. Alone in the desert, Tom dropped his bag on the sand and looked at the empty space where they would build. Well, he said, I guess we better start digging. They worked through the rest of the day and into the night. The two suns set at different times, one after the other. First the sky turned purple, then black. Strange stars appeared overhead, constellations that no human had named yet. Jake operated the digging machine while Tom directed the work. They cut deep into the sand and rock beneath. 10 meters down, 15, 20. The other aliens watched from their floating habitats, their faces showing confusion and amusement. Why so deep? One Dreth asked Lisa the next morning. Our burrows go only 5 meters down. Lisa wiped sweat from her face and smiled. Because on Earth, we learned that the deeper you go, the safer you are. Tornadoes, hurricanes, sandstorms. The ground itself becomes your armor. The Dreth clicked thoughtfully and walked away. Days passed. The foundation was poured. Thick concrete filled the deep hole they had dug. Steel bars ran through it like bones. Then the walls began to rise. Not tall and elegant like the Valoran structures. Not hidden underground like the Dreth burrows. The human shelter grew like a bunker, half buried in the sand. Its walls curved outward at the base. Its windows were small and narrow. It looked ugly. It looked primitive. It looked like something designed to survive the end of the world. Commander Vex visited their construction site on the 10th day. He walked around the half-finished structure, his crystal face showing open disgust. This is your shelter? He asked. This ugly lump of stone? Concrete, Tom corrected him. Vex ignored the correction. It has no elegance, no beauty. It does not even float. It does not need to float, Jake said. He was tired. His muscles ached. But there was pride in his voice. It needs to stand. Vex shook his head slowly. You humans are strange creatures. You come from a planet that tried to kill you, and you never learned to move beyond basic survival. You think like prey animals, always expecting disaster. Maybe, Lisa said. She was standing nearby, covered in dust and concrete powder. But prey animals survive because they expect the predator. It is the ones who feel safe that get eaten. Vex looked at her for a long moment. Something flickered in his crystal eyes, some emotion that humans could not read. Then he turned and walked away without another word. That night, Jake sat on top of their unfinished shelter and looked up at the alien stars. His tablet showed weather data from the orbital monitoring station. Far to the west, deep in the desert, something was stirring. An atmospheric disturbance. Just a small one for now. Nothing to worry about. But Jake had grown up in tornado country. He knew how fast small things could become big things. He knew how quickly the sky could turn angry. He saved the data and said nothing to the aliens. They would not listen anyway. They believed their shields could handle anything. They believed their technology made them safe. Jake knew better. He had seen what nature could do when it decided to fight back. He had seen cities turn to rubble. He had seen rivers swallow entire towns. He looked at their ugly concrete shelter and felt grateful for every primitive, simple, ugly inch of it. Somewhere in the west, the wind was beginning to blow. 3 weeks had passed since the humans arrived on Kasara 7. Their shelter was almost finished now. It sat on the edge of the outpost like an ugly scar on the beautiful desert. The curved concrete walls were gray and rough. The narrow windows looked like suspicious eyes watching the horizon. Half of the structure was buried in the sand, anchored deep into the rock below. The aliens still laughed at it. Every day, Jake heard their comments. Every day, he ignored them and kept working. Tom Bradley stood on top of the shelter, checking the final layer of reinforced plating on the roof. His face was burned red from the twin suns. His hands were covered in cuts and blisters. But he smiled as he worked. He knew what they were building. He knew why it mattered. Below him, Lisa Marsh was installing the water recyclers in the underground storage area. The shelter had 2 levels above ground and 2 levels below. The lowest level held emergency supplies, water reserves, and a small medical station. It could support 20 people for 2 weeks if necessary. Jake hoped it would never be necessary. Commander Vex had made life difficult for the humans since their arrival. He assigned them to the most dangerous mining sectors. He gave them the worst equipment. He scheduled their work during the hottest hours when both suns were high in the sky. Every assignment seemed designed to break them, but humans were hard to break. Jake climbed down from the shelter and found Kira waiting for him. The Dreth scientist had become a regular visitor over the past weeks. She said she was curious about human construction methods. Jake suspected she was also lonely. The other Dreth did not seem to like her much. She asked too many questions. "Your walls curve outward at the bottom," Kira said, walking around the shelter. Her many legs moved in a complex pattern that somehow looked graceful. "Why?" Jake wiped the sweat from his face. "Wind flows over curved surfaces instead of pushing against them. A flat wall catches the wind like a sail. A curved wall lets the wind slide past." Kira made her clicking sound of interest. "And the narrow windows?" "Small openings mean less pressure difference between inside and outside. Big windows can explode inward during a storm, or get sucked outward. Either way, bad news for anyone inside." Kira was quiet for a moment. Her compound eyes reflected the orange desert around them. "On my homeworld, we have large storms sometimes, but we simply go underground until they pass. We have never thought to build structures that could survive above ground. On Earth, sometimes you cannot go underground," Jake said. "Sometimes the water rises too fast. Sometimes the ground itself becomes dangerous. We learned to build shelters that could handle anything because we never knew which kind of disaster was coming next." "Your planet sounds terrible," Kira said. Jake laughed. It was a tired laugh, but honest. "It was. It is. But it taught us things. Lessons written in blood and tears. Every building code on Earth exists because someone died. Every safety regulation came from a tragedy." Kira's legs shifted uncomfortably. "That is a sad way to learn." "Yes," Jake agreed. "But the lessons stay with you forever." That evening, Jake received new data from the orbital monitoring station. He sat alone in the shelter's small control room and stared at the screen. The atmospheric disturbance had grown. It was no longer small. It was no longer nothing to worry about. The storm system was 300 kilometers wide now. Wind speeds at its center exceeded 200 kilometers per hour, and it was growing stronger every day. The orbital station's computers predicted it would reach 400 kilometers per hour by the time it hit the outpost. Maybe more. Jake had never seen readings like this. Not on Earth. Not anywhere. He walked across the outpost to the Valoran command center. The building floated 3 meters above the sand, held in place by invisible forces that humans did not fully understand. Jake climbed the hovering stairs and entered without knocking. Commander Vex was inside, studying holographic displays with 2 other Valorans. They all turned to look at Jake with the same expression of mild annoyance. "Human," Vex said, "you are not permitted here without invitation." Jake ignored the comment. He held up his tablet and showed them the weather data. "We have a problem. A massive storm is forming in the west. It will reach us in 3 days. Maybe less." Vex glanced at the tablet with disinterest. "We are aware of the atmospheric activity. It is not a concern." "Not a concern?" Jake stepped closer. "Wind speeds over 400 kilometers per hour. That is faster than the strongest hurricanes on Earth. That is faster than anything I have ever seen." Vex waved his crystalline hand dismissively. "Our shields are rated for far greater forces. Your primitive planet has nothing comparable to Valoran engineering. This storm will pass around our habitats like water around a stone. And if it does not?" Jake asked. Vex's eyes hardened. The light inside his body turned from soft blue to angry red. "Are you questioning our technology, human? We have survived on 100 worlds. We have faced threats your species cannot imagine. A windstorm is nothing to us." Jake felt his frustration rising. He pushed it down. Getting angry would not help. "I am not questioning your technology. I am warning you about the storm. On Earth, we learned that nature does not care about technology. Nature does not care about shields or confidence. Nature just is. And when nature decides to destroy something, the only question is whether you are ready." "We are ready," Vex said coldly. "Now leave. You are not welcome here." Jake left. There was nothing more he could say. He walked back to the human shelter. The night was quiet. The strange stars burned overhead. In the distance to the west, the horizon looked wrong. It was too dark, too flat, like something was eating the sky. Tom was waiting inside the shelter. "How did it go?" "About how you would expect," Jake said. "They think they are untouchable. The Dreth? I will try them tomorrow. But I do not expect different." Lisa came up from the lower level. Her face was serious. "I finished installing the emergency supplies. We have food for 2 weeks. Water for 3 if we ration carefully. Medical supplies. Communication equipment. Everything we need to survive." Jake nodded slowly. "Good, because I think we are going to need it." The next morning, Jake met with the Dreth leaders. They were more polite than Vex, but equally dismissive. Their underground burrows had served their species for thousands of years. They had survived countless storms on countless worlds. They did not need human advice. Jake returned to the shelter feeling defeated. Kira found him sitting outside, staring at the western horizon. The darkness there had grown. It was visible now even during the day, a brown smudge against the orange sky. "They did not listen," Kira said. It was not a question. No. Kira sat beside him, her many legs folding beneath her body in a complex arrangement. "I looked at your weather data last night. I ran my own calculations." She paused. "I think you are right to be afraid." Jake looked at her. "You believe me?" "I believe the numbers. They do not lie." Kira's compound eyes reflected the approaching darkness. "But my people will not listen either. They trust our burrows. They trust our history." She made a sad clicking sound. "History cannot protect you from something new." "No," Jake agreed. "It cannot." That night, the humans worked faster. They reinforced the shelter's weak points. They triple-checked the seals on every door and window. They tested the air filtration system and the backup generators. They moved emergency supplies to the lowest level. Tom worked until his hands bled. Lisa organized medical supplies until her eyes could barely focus. Jake checked and rechecked the shelter's structural integrity until the numbers blurred together on his screen. Outside, the wind was starting to pick up. It was gentle now, almost playful. But Jake could feel something in it. Something hungry. On the morning of the third day, the western horizon disappeared entirely. A wall of brown and orange and red stretched from the ground to the sky. It was taller than any storm Jake had ever seen. It was wider than mountains. It was coming. Jake stood outside the shelter and watched it approach. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking. But there was nothing more he could do. The shelter was ready. The humans were ready. He just hoped it would be enough. The other aliens went about their business as if nothing was wrong. The Valorans floated in their elegant habitats. The Dreth crawled in and out of their burrows. They did not even look at the horizon. They were safe. They were protected. They had nothing to fear. Jake looked at the storm one last time. Then he went inside and sealed the door. The universe was about to teach someone a lesson. Jake just prayed the humans would not be the ones paying the price. The storm hit at noon. One moment, there was light. The next moment, there was nothing but darkness and sound. The wind did not build slowly. It did not give warning. It came like a fist, slamming into the outpost with force that shook the ground itself. Inside the human shelter, Jake braced himself against the wall. The concrete trembled around him, but held firm. The sound was incredible. It was not just wind. It was a roar, a scream, 1,000 voices all shouting at once. It was the voice of a planet that had finally decided to fight back. Lisa was at the monitoring station, trying to make sense of the data flooding in from their sensors. Wind speed just hit 420 kilometers per hour. She shouted over the noise. And it is still climbing. Tom was checking the seals on the main door. Everything is holding. The pressure differential is within limits. We are okay. Jake nodded. They were okay. But what about everyone else? He moved to the communication panel and tried to contact the Valoran habitats. Static. He tried the Dreth burrows. More static. Either the storm was blocking all signals, or there was no one left to answer. The shelter shook again. Something massive had hit the roof. Through the narrow windows, Jake could see nothing but brown and black. The sand was moving so fast it had become liquid. It flowed past the shelter like a river of stone, scraping against the curved walls and sliding away. The Valoran shields, Lisa said suddenly. Her voice was strange, hollow. I am picking up energy readings. They are flickering. Jake moved to her station. The display showed the elegant floating habitats of the Valorans, or what was left of them. The energy shields that protected them were flashing red on the screen. Red meant failure. Red meant death. They cannot hold, Lisa whispered. The shields are not designed for this much sustained pressure. They were built to stop attacks, not continuous force. The sand is grinding them down. Jake watched the screen. One by one, the Valoran shields began to fail. First one flickered out. Then another. Then 3 more at once. The graceful floating structures that had seemed so perfect, so advanced, so superior, began to fall from the sky. Through the static on the communication panel, Jake heard screaming. It was not human screaming. It was the sound of crystalline voices breaking apart. It was the sound of beings who had never known fear suddenly learning what it meant. We have to help them, Jake said. Tom grabbed his arm. How? We open that door, we all die. Jake pulled free. There has to be a way. We cannot just sit here and listen to them die. Lisa stood up from her station. Her face was pale but determined. The emergency hatch. The one on the lower level. It opens into a covered tunnel that leads toward the Valoran sector. We dug it in case we needed a secondary exit. That tunnel was not finished, Tom said. It only goes halfway. Then we go halfway. We bring anyone we can reach back here. Jake was already moving toward the stairs that led to the lower levels. Tom, you are with me. Lisa, stay here and monitor the situation. If we do not come back in 30 minutes, seal everything and wait out the storm. Lisa looked like she wanted to argue, but she nodded. 30 minutes. Not a second more. Jake and Tom descended into the darkness of the lower level. The emergency hatch was small and heavy, designed to withstand enormous pressure. Jake spun the wheel and pushed it open. Beyond was the tunnel, barely lit by emergency lights that flickered with each gust of wind above. The tunnel was 2 meters wide and 1.5 meters tall. They had to crouch to move through it. The walls were reinforced concrete, but Jake could feel them vibrating. The storm was trying to reach them even here, underground. They moved as fast as they could. The tunnel ended abruptly after 50 meters, opening into a rough excavation that was never completed. Sand was pouring in from above, slowly filling the space. Beyond the sand, Jake could see the ruins of the Valoran sector. It was gone. All of it. The beautiful floating structures had been ripped apart and scattered across the desert. Pieces of silver metal and shattered crystal lay everywhere, half buried in the moving sand. Bodies lay among the wreckage. Some were moving. Most were not. Jake pulled his protective mask tight over his face and stepped out into the chaos. The wind hit him like a hammer. Even here, partially sheltered by the ruins, it was strong enough to knock him off his feet. He grabbed a piece of metal and held on, pulling himself forward meter by meter. He found the first survivor 10 meters from the tunnel entrance. A young Valoran, barely more than a child by their standards. Her crystalline body was cracked in a dozen places. She was trying to crawl towards something, but the wind kept pushing her back. Jake grabbed her arm and pulled her close. She looked at him with eyes full of fear and confusion. She had never known a human could survive where she could not. She had never imagined she would need a human to save her. Tom appeared beside him, fighting his way through the wind. Together, they half carried, half dragged the young Valoran back to the tunnel. She was heavy. Crystal beings were denser than they looked. Jake's muscles burned with the effort. But they made it. They went back out. Again and again. Jake lost count of how many trips they made. His body moved without thought. His mind went blank. All that mattered was the next survivor, the next body to pull from the sand, the next life to save. He found Commander Vex on the 6th trip. The Valoran leader was lying beneath a piece of wreckage that had once been his own habitat. His body was cracked so badly that light leaked from him like blood. His eyes were open, but empty. Jake grabbed him and pulled. Vex was even heavier than the others. Jake screamed with the effort, but he did not let go. He dragged the crystal alien through the wind and sand, through the screaming air, through the darkness that wanted to swallow them both. They reached the tunnel just as Jake's strength finally gave out. He collapsed against the concrete wall, gasping for breath. Vex lay beside him, barely conscious. "You came for me," Vex whispered. His voice was cracked like his body. "Why?" Jake could not answer. He did not have the breath. Tom took over, pulling Vex deeper into the tunnel. Other humans had arrived to help. They formed a chain, passing survivors from hand to hand until they reached the safety of the shelter. Lisa met Jake at the shelter entrance. Her eyes were wide with shock at what she was seeing. Broken aliens, shattered crystal, bodies that barely clung to life. The shelter was filling up with survivors. Far more than it was designed to hold. How many? Jake asked. 47 so far, Lisa said. 8 of us, 22 Valorans, 17 Dreth. We found some Dreth burrows that collapsed. We pulled everyone we could find. 47 people. The shelter was built for 20. Jake looked around at the crowded space. Aliens lay everywhere, on the floor, against the walls, filling every corner. Some were crying. Some were silent with shock. Some were badly injured and needed medical attention immediately. Outside, the storm continued to rage. It had been 6 hours since it started. The sensors showed no sign of it stopping. Jake found a small space near the main door and sat down. His whole body ached. His hands were bleeding. His lungs burned with every breath. Commander Vex was nearby, propped against the wall. Other Valorans were tending to his injuries, but there was only so much they could do. His eyes found Jake across the crowded room. "Your shelter," Vex said. His voice was barely audible over the wind outside. "It is still standing." "Yes," Jake said. Vex was quiet for a long moment. The light inside his cracked body pulsed weakly. "We laughed at you. We called you primitive. Animals playing in the sand." Jake said nothing. "You built this ugly thing, and we mocked you for it." Vex's voice cracked like his body. "And now it is the only thing keeping us alive." Jake looked at the thick concrete walls around them. They were gray and rough and covered in dust. They had no elegance, no beauty, but they were standing. In a storm that had destroyed everything else, they were standing. "On Earth," Jake said slowly, "we have a saying. Do not mock the house that survives the storm." Vex closed his eyes. "I understand now. Your species is not primitive. You are survivors. You have survived things that would have killed us. You have learned lessons we were too proud to learn." Jake did not answer. He was too tired to feel any satisfaction. All he felt was the weight of the storm outside and the weight of the lives now depending on him. The wind screamed on. The shelter held. And somewhere in the darkness, Jake began planning how to keep everyone alive until morning. The storm raged for 6 days. Inside the shelter, time lost all meaning. There was no day or night, only the endless roar of wind and the dim glow of emergency lights. 47 beings lived in a space meant for 20. They slept in shifts, ate in rations, and breathed air that grew thinner with each passing hour. Jake had not slept more than 2 hours at a time since the storm began. There was always something that needed his attention. A leak in the upper level. A fight between scared survivors. A medical emergency in the lower storage area. He moved through the crowded shelter like a ghost, solving problems before they became disasters. Lisa worked beside him without complaint. She had become the shelter's doctor, nurse, and counselor all at once. Her medical training was basic, meant for human injuries and illnesses. But she adapted. She learned to treat crystalline cracks in Valoran bodies. She learned to mend broken chitin on Dreth shells. She learned to calm fears in beings she had never spoken to before this week. Tom became the shelter's engineer and protector. He walked the walls every 4 hours, checking for stress fractures and weak points. He reinforced problem areas with whatever materials they had. He kept the air recyclers running when they wanted to fail. He kept the water purifiers working when they clogged with dust. He held the shelter together through pure stubbornness. On the 3rd day, Kira approached Jake in the lower level. The Dreth scientist had been helping Lisa with medical duties, using her knowledge of alien biology to save lives that would otherwise have been lost. "I have been studying your shelter," Kira said. Her clicking voice was softer than usual. "I understand now why it works." Jake was too tired for long conversations. "Why?" Kira gestured with 2 of her many legs. The curved walls push the wind away instead of fighting it. The narrow windows prevent pressure changes. The deep foundations keep the structure anchored. The buried lower levels use the planet itself as armor. She paused. Every design choice serves a purpose. Nothing is wasted. That is how we build on Earth, Jake said. We do not build for beauty. We build for survival. Your planet must be very dangerous. Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. Earth is hurricanes that destroy cities, tornadoes that erase towns from the map, earthquakes that swallow buildings whole, volcanoes that bury civilizations in ash, tsunamis that wash away everything in their path. He looked at the concrete walls around them. Humans have been fighting our own planet since we learned to stand up. This shelter is built from 1,000,000 years of lessons learned the hard way. Kira was quiet for a long moment. We Dreth have lived on many worlds. Some were harsh, but we always found ways to hide from the danger. Underground, in caves, in shelves. Her compound eyes studied Jake with new understanding. You humans do not hide. You build. You stand in the open and dare the universe to knock you down. Sometimes it does knock us down, Jake admitted. But we get back up. We rebuild. We make our shelters stronger. And we try again. Kira clicked softly. I think I understand your species better now. On the fourth day, trouble came from inside the shelter. A Valoran named Nox had grown frustrated with the cramped conditions and limited food. He was tall, even for his species, and his crystalline body glowed with angry red light. He confronted Commander Vex in front of everyone. This is your fault, Nox shouted. You told us the storm was nothing. You said our shields would hold. You laughed at the humans who tried to warn us. And now look at us, living in this cave like animals, eating scraps, breathing recycled air. Vex was still badly injured. He leaned against the wall, unable to stand on his own. But his voice was steady. I was wrong. I admit it. But blame changes nothing. Blame shows us who is responsible, Nox growled. Blame shows us who should no longer lead. The shelter grew quiet. Everyone watched the confrontation. The other Valorans shifted nervously. The Dreth huddled together. The humans stood back, uncertain. Jake stepped between the two Valorans. Stop. Nox turned his angry gaze on the human. This is not your concern. This is Valoran business. We are all in the same shelter, Jake said calmly. Everything that happens here is everyone's business. You want to fight about leadership? Fine. Do it after the storm. Right now, we need every person focused on survival. Not blame. Not anger. Survival. Nox's light pulsed brighter. And who are you to give orders? You are just a human. Your species was still living in caves when mine was crossing the stars. Jake did not back down. Maybe, but my species built this shelter. My species pulled you out of the sand when your technology failed. My species is the reason you are still alive to complain. The silence stretched. Nox's light flickered between red and orange. For a moment, Jake thought the Valoran would attack him. Then Kira spoke up. Her clicking voice cut through the tension. The human is right. We can argue about fault later. Right now, we need to focus on staying alive. All of us, other voices joined her. Dreth and Valoran alike called for peace. The anger in the room slowly faded. Nox backed down, moving to a corner where he could sulk in private. Jake returned to his work. But he noticed Vex watching him with something new in his cracked eyes. Something that might have been respect. On the fifth day, the food situation became critical. Lisa gathered the humans in the lower level for an emergency meeting. We have enough rations for 3 more days, she reported. But that is based on 20 people, not 47. At current consumption rates, we run out tomorrow night. Tom rubbed his tired eyes. Can we reduce portions? We already have. Everyone is eating half of what they need. The Valorans can survive longer without food, but the Dreth need regular meals. Their metabolism is different. Jake thought about the problem. What about the emergency reserves? The supplies we buried for worst-case scenarios? We are already using them. That is why we have 3 days instead of 1. The silence was heavy. They all knew what was at stake. Finally, Jake spoke. Then we ration harder. I know it is not enough, but it buys us time. The storm cannot last forever. When it stops, we can search the wreckage for surviving supplies. What if there are no surviving supplies? Lisa asked. What if everything was destroyed? Then we figure something out. We improvise. We adapt. Jake looked at each of his crewmates in turn. That is what humans do. We find ways to survive when survival seems impossible. They cut rations again. Everyone ate a third of what they needed. It was not enough, but it kept them going. That night, something unexpected happened. A young Dreth named Tick approached the humans with a small container. Inside were pale pellets that looked like dried mud. Emergency nutrition, Tick explained. All Dreth carry them. We are taught to hide them in our shells from childhood. They taste terrible, but they keep you alive. Other Dreth came forward with similar offerings. Some Valorans contributed as well, sharing mineral supplements that they usually kept private. The aliens gave what they could. It was not much. But combined with the human supplies, it was enough. On the 6th day, the wind began to slow. Jake noticed it first. The roar that had been constant for nearly a week was changing, getting softer, less angry. He checked the sensors. Wind speed had dropped to 300 kilometers per hour, then 200, then 100. It is ending, Lisa said. Her voice was barely a whisper, as if she was afraid to believe it. The survivors gathered near the windows, watching the brown darkness out slowly lighten. Shapes began to appear in the sand. Wreckage, debris, the twisted remains of what had once been an advanced mining outpost. By evening, the wind had stopped completely. The silence was almost as overwhelming as the noise had been. Jake opened the main door for the first time in 6 days. Hot air rushed in, carrying the smell of dust and something else. Something burnt. He stepped outside. The world had changed. The desert that had been flat and orange was now covered in dunes and debris. Mountains of sand had formed where buildings once stood. The elegant Valoran habitats were gone without a trace. The Dreth burrow entrances were buried under meters of sand. Only one structure remained standing, gray, rough, ugly, half buried in sand that had tried to swallow it whole. The human shelter. Scarred but alive. Behind Jake, the survivors emerged one by one. Valorans and Dreth looked at the devastation with shock and grief. Some cried. Some stood in silence. Some fell to their knees. Commander Vex limped out with help from 2 other Valorans. He looked at the ruins of his civilization on this world. Then he looked at the concrete walls of the human shelter. How? He asked. How is it still standing? Jake looked at the structure he had built with his own hands. The structure that everyone had mocked. The structure that had saved 47 lives. Because we expected this, Jake said. Not this exact storm, but something like it. On Earth, we learned a long time ago that the universe does not care about elegance or technology or pride. The universe only respects one thing: the will to survive. Vex was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I have much to learn from your species. Jake turned back to face the ruined world. Somewhere out there, rescue ships were coming. Help was on the way. But for now, in this moment, they had survived, and that was enough. The rescue ships arrived 3 days after the storm ended. Jake watched them descend from the orange sky. Valorn vessels with their graceful curves, Dreth transports with their angular shapes, human shuttles with their practical designs. They landed in a row on the flattened sand, their engines stirring up dust that had finally settled. The survivors were waiting outside the shelter. 47 beings who had shared food and air and fear for almost 2 weeks. They were thinner now, weaker, but they were alive. Medical teams rushed out of the ships. They took the worst injured first, loading them onto stretchers and carrying them to waiting hospitals in orbit. The Valorns with their cracked bodies, the Dreth with their broken shells, the humans with their exhaustion. Jake refused to leave until everyone else was taken care of. He stood by the shelter entrance, watching the evacuation, making sure no one was forgotten. Lisa stood with him on one side, Tom on the other. A Valorn officer approached him. He was tall and perfect, his crystalline body glowing with healthy light. He looked at the humans with an expression Jake could not read. "You are the ones who built this structure," the officer said. It was not a question. "Yes," Jake answered. The officer looked at the shelter. His eyes moved over the thick concrete walls, the narrow windows, the curved base that had deflected winds strong enough to destroy everything else on the planet. He was quiet for a long time. "Our leaders want to speak with you," he finally said. "All of you." The meeting happened 2 weeks later, on a space station orbiting Kisara 7. Representatives from all 3 species gathered in a large conference room. The humans sat on one side, the Valorans on another. The Dreth on the third. Commander Vex was there. His body had healed, though faint crack lines still showed where the damage had been worst. He moved stiffly, but his eyes were clear. Kira was there too, sitting with the Dreth delegation. She gave Lisa a small wave when she entered. The Valoran High Commander spoke first. He was ancient by their standards, his crystal body clouded with age. But his voice was strong. "We have reviewed the data from Kisara 7, he said. The storm was unprecedented. Nothing in our records predicted its possibility. Our technology, which we believed to be superior, failed completely." He paused. Every Valoran structure was destroyed. Every shield collapsed. If not for the human shelter, there would have been no survivors. The room was silent. The humans were mocked. The High Commander continued. Their methods were called primitive. Their shelter was dismissed as worthless. Yet it was the only structure that survived. His clouded eyes turned to Jake. "Why? What do you know that we do not?" Jake stood slowly. He was still tired, still recovering. But some things needed to be said. "We do not know anything special," he began. "We are not smarter than you. Our technology is not better. In most ways, we are behind." He looked around the room at the faces watching him. "But we come from a planet that tried to kill us. Every day, for millions of years, Earth tested humanity. Storms, earthquakes, floods, ice ages, meteor impacts. Our planet threw everything it had at us, and we survived. Not because we were strong or smart or special, but because we learned." He walked toward the center of the room. "Every time disaster struck, we studied what went wrong. We changed our buildings. We improved our shelters. We wrote rules in the blood of those we lost. When a tornado destroyed a town, we learned to dig basements. When a hurricane flooded a city, we learned to build levees. When an earthquake collapsed our buildings, we learned to make them flexible." Jake's voice grew stronger. "We did not become arrogant because we survived. We became humble. We assumed the next disaster would be worse than the last. We prepared for things that had never happened before." He turned to face Commander Vex. "You asked why we built a concrete shelter when you had floating habitats and energy shields. The answer is simple. We did not trust that nothing could go wrong. We assumed something would go wrong. We built for the worst day, not the average day. Jake smiled slightly. On Earth, we have a saying: hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Your species hoped for the best. Our species prepared for the worst. And that made all the difference. Commander Vex rose from his seat. The room tensed, expecting confrontation. But Vex did something no one expected. He bowed. It was a deep bow, formal and respectful. A bow of acknowledgement from a proud species to another. I laughed at your shelter, Vex said. I called it primitive. I called your species inferior. He straightened and looked Jake directly in the eyes. I was a fool. Your species has wisdom that we lack. You understand that the universe is dangerous, that survival is never guaranteed, that technology cannot solve every problem. He paused. We have much to learn from you. The meeting continued for several hours. By the end, decisions had been made. The outpost on Kisara 7 would be rebuilt. But this time, humans would lead the construction efforts. Not because human technology was best, but because human thinking was needed. The new structures would combine Valoran precision, Dreth efficiency, and human resilience. Jake was offered command of the reconstruction project. He accepted on one condition, that teams would be mixed. Humans working alongside Valorans and Dreth, learning from each other, building together. Kira requested a permanent assignment to work with human engineers. Her request was granted. Lisa would be her partner, teaching her the lessons that Earth had written in tragedy. Tom would oversee construction, training alien workers in techniques that humans had developed over centuries. Simple techniques. Effective techniques. The kind that saved lives when everything else failed. The final ceremony happened on the surface of Kisara 7, at the site of the old outpost. The human shelter still stood, scarred but solid. It had become a monument. A reminder. Representatives from all three species gathered before it. A plaque was being placed on its concrete wall. Commander Vex read the words aloud for everyone to hear. Here stood the shelter that saved us, built by human hands, using human knowledge. When our technology failed, their wisdom endured. May we never forget the lesson. Survival belongs not to the proudest or the most advanced, but to those who prepare for the worst and hope for the best. The crowd was silent. Then, slowly, they began to applaud. Valoran hands of crystal. Dreth legs clicking on shell. Human palms striking together. The sound mixed and blended into something new. Afterwards, Jake stood alone before the shelter. The two suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Kira found him there. What are you thinking? She asked. Jake touched the rough concrete wall. It was warm from the suns. I am thinking about all the people on Earth who died so we could learn these lessons. All the towns destroyed by storms. All the cities swallowed by earthquakes. All the lives lost to disasters we could not prevent. Kira was quiet beside him. They never knew their deaths would mean something, Jake continued. They never knew that someday, on a planet far from Earth, the lessons written in their blood would save alien lives. But it did. Their sacrifice mattered, even if they never knew it. Kira clicked softly. That is a beautiful thought. That is humanity, Jake said. We suffer. We learn. We pass on what we know. And someday, somewhere, that knowledge saves lives we will never meet. He turned away from the shelter and looked at the horizon. Construction crews were already at work in the distance. New foundations were being dug. Deep foundations. Strong foundations. The kind that would survive anything. Come on, Jake said. We have a lot of work to do. They walked together toward the construction site, leaving the old shelter behind. It would stand for years, maybe centuries, as a reminder of what happened here. A reminder that sometimes the simplest solutions are the best. That sometimes the ugly, practical choice saves more lives than the elegant, beautiful one. Behind them, the shelter's walls caught the last light of the setting suns. Gray and rough and scarred. The most beautiful thing Jake had ever built. The universe was harsh. The universe was dangerous. But humanity had learned to survive it. And now, they were teaching others. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.